Everyone's heard this line before: if you work hard, money circulates. If money circulates, society prospers. It sounds logical, comforting even. But here's the uncomfortable mystery no one asks out loud. If wealth is supposed to circulate, why does it keep pooling in the same places? Why do recessions always hurt the same people? Why do bailouts always go upward? Why does productivity rise, technology explode, and yet wages barely move? This isn't an accident. It's not incompetence. Because wealth does circulate, just not for you. The real question isn't why inequality exists. The real question is, who designed the system so wealth appears to move while staying trapped? That's what we're unpacking today. To understand the trap, we have to go back to a time when wealth couldn't hide. In early economies, agrarian societies, local trade systems, even early mercantilism, wealth was tied to real things: land, livestock, labor, physical goods. If you wanted more wealth, you needed production. If you hoarded too much, it was visible and dangerous. Kings fell because peasants could see the imbalance. Money back then was a representation of value, not a replacement for it. And that was the problem, because visible wealth creates accountability. The first major shift happened quietly. Banks realized something revolutionary. They didn't need to store wealth, they could create claims on it. With the rise of lending, interest, paper instruments, fractional reserves, wealth stopped being about what existed and became about what was owed. This is the moment wealth learned how to move without moving. Loans created circulation on paper. Interest created gravity, pulling value back toward lenders. Debt-insured money returned with more attached. This was the birth of the trap. Money could now flow outward, but value always flowed back. Fast forward to central banking. Governments realized they could spend more than they taxed, borrow instead of produce, push costs into the future. Central banks promise stability, but stability for who? Here's the key mechanism most people miss. When money is created as debt, it must return to its source, with interest. That means someone must always lose. Defaults are not bugs, they are features. Scarcity is maintained artificially. Wealth circulates through wages, consumption, and markets. But ownership never follows it. You rent money your entire life. They own the system that issues it. Every system hits stress. The Great Depression, the 1970s, stagflation, the 2008 financial crisis. Each time, the same pattern appears. 1. Excess debt builds quietly. 2. A shock exposes instability. 3. Liquidity vanishes for the public. 4. Emergency money appears for institutions. In 2008, trillions were created overnight. Think about the 2008 financial crisis. For years, there was this quiet, almost invisible buildup of debt. It wasn't just regular folks taking out loans. The real problem was brewing deep inside the financial system. Banks were handing out subprime mortgages like candy to people who couldn't really afford them. But here's the crazy part. They bundled these risky mortgages together into complex financial products called collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs. They then got these CDOs rated as super safe, AAA investments, and sold them to investors all over the world. It was like building a skyscraper on a foundation of sand, but everyone thought it was solid rock because the rating agency said so. Then came the shock. The housing market started to wobble, and people began defaulting on their mortgages. The sand foundation started to give way. The real breaking point was in September 2008, when Lehman Brothers, a massive investment bank, collapsed. Panic erupted. Suddenly, no one knew what these complex derivatives were actually worth, and trust between banks evaporated overnight. Liquidity, the lifeblood of the economy, just vanished. The credit markets froze. For you and me, getting a loan became nearly impossible. But for the big banks, the ones who created the mess, they were deemed too big to fail, and governments stepped in with massive bailouts, pumping money directly into them to prevent a total collapse of the global financial system. It was a stark reminder of how interconnected and fragile our modern economy can be. This whole event is a perfect illustration of Minsky's theory in action: not for wages, not for households, not for debt relief, but for banks whose collapse would expose the entire illusion. We were told this money would trickle down. It didn't, because it wasn't designed to. After every crisis, wealth becomes more concentrated. Why? Because asset owners recover first. When central banks inject money, stocks rise, real estate rises, bonds stabilize, but wages, they lag. Savings, they're diluted. Debt remains, but assets inflate. So the people who already own assets get richer. Everyone else gets higher prices and weaker purchasing power. This is not unfairness by accident. This is mathematics by design. Every few years, a solution is proposed. Higher minimum wages, tax reforms, stimulus checks, financial inclusion. But these fixes all share the same flaw. They inject money into circulation without changing ownership. It's like pouring water into a bucket with a hole at the bottom and wondering why it never fills. So, why do all these popular solutions seem to fail? Let's break it down. Think of our economy like a bucket. Problem is, this bucket is full of holes. First, let's talk about raising the minimum wage. It sounds great, right? More money in people's pockets? But here's the catch. When everyone suddenly has more money to spend, but the amount of stuff to buy stays the same, prices just go up. Landlords raise the rent, grocery stores increase their prices, and suddenly that pay raise disappears into thin air. It's like pouring water into our leaky bucket. The water level might rise for a second, but it quickly leaks out through the hole of inflation. Okay, what about tax reforms? Let's tax the rich more. Noble idea, but wealth is slippery. The super wealthy have teams of accountants and lawyers whose entire job is to find new loopholes. They move their money into complex trusts, offshore accounts, or different types of assets that aren't taxed as heavily. It's like trying to patch one hole in the bucket, only for the water pressure to create 3 new leaks elsewhere. The wealth simply finds another way to escape. And finally, stimulus checks. We all got them, and it felt like a lifeline. But where did that money actually end up? Most of us used it to pay rent, buy groceries, or pay off credit card debt. So, the money went straight from our bank accounts to landlords, big corporations, and banks. It didn't stay with us. It flowed right through our hands and back to the very asset owners at the top. Each of these fixes tries to pour more water into the leaky bucket, but none of them actually plug the holes. The real problem isn't the amount of water we're pouring in. It's the system itself that's designed to let the wealth leak away from the majority. As long as money is created as debt, assets absorb excess liquidity, interest pulls value upward. Think about today's world. We see echoes of this everywhere. Take the gig economy, for instance. You might be driving for a rideshare company or delivering food. You're working, you're providing a service. But you don't own the car you might be leasing. You don't own the platform you're working on, and you have very little say in the rules. It's labor, but without the ownership, security, or benefits that used to come with a traditional job. It feels a lot like being a tenant on someone else's digital land, doesn't it? And what about the last few years? During the pandemic, we saw something wild happen. Asset prices, stocks, crypto, real estate shot up to the moon. People who already owned things got much, much richer just by holding on to them. Meanwhile, for most people who rely on a paycheck, wages barely moved. In fact, when you factor in inflation, many people actually lost ground. It was a massive transfer of wealth, not through hard work or innovation, but simply through ownership. Technology was supposed to be the great equalizer, right? It promised to level the playing field, but often it's done the opposite. Automation replaces jobs, concentrating profits in the hands of the company owners. Giant tech platforms become monopolies, controlling the digital marketplaces where we all have to do business. Instead of spreading the wealth, these new technologies have often become powerful tools for concentrating it even further. It's a modern twist on an old story. Those who own the means of production, whether it's land or a digital platform, tend to capture the lion's share of the rewards. It really makes you think about what ownership means in the 21st century. Wealth will always escape circulation. Look around today. Productivity is at historic highs. Technology has eliminated entire costs. Yet, housing is less affordable, education costs more, healthcare consumes incomes. Meanwhile, the richest individuals increase wealth during crises. This isn't because they're smarter. It's because they're positioned closer to money creation. The closer you are to the source, the less inflation touches you. The further away you are, the more it erodes your life. Here's the truth most people never hear. Circulation is permitted. Accumulation is protected. The system allows money to move, just enough to function. But ownership is locked behind legal structures, financial instruments, political influence. Wealth doesn't vanish. It settles, like sediment at the bottom of a river. 1. Wealth concentration is structural, not moral. It's not about greed. It's about design. 2. Debt-based money ensures permanent imbalance. Someone must always owe more than exists. 3. Reforms that ignore ownership will always fail. Circulation without control is illusion. Wealth never circulates and debt never disappears, and crises are predictable. And the real danger isn't collapse, it's acceptance. Because a system that depends on people not understanding it only survives as long as the mystery remains intact. If this made you uncomfortable, good. That means you're paying attention. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this. Share this with someone who still believes the system is broken, because broken systems don't repeat this precisely. Designed ones do.